Welcome back to another episode of the Housing Collective podcast. My name is Tom Neely, founder and director of Nemar Search, and today I'm thrilled to be joined by Ruth Cooke, Chief Executive of GreenSquareAccord. So Ruth, pleasure to have you here today on the podcast. For the listeners, could you give us a brief introduction to yourself and your organisation?
Thank you for inviting me on the podcast. So I am Ruth, I'm Chief Exec at GreenSquareAccord. I think I'll probably qualify as a housing lifer now. I realised I've been in the sector nearly 30 years this year in a range of roles, originally finance roles and then more latterly as a chief exec and more latterly still as CEO at GreenSquareAccord. So we are celebrating our 4th birthday today, actually, created from the merger of GreenSquare Group down in the southwest and Accord in the West Midlands. So we're a medium-sized organisation. We've got about 26,000 homes and a range of operations in a range of geographies.
Well, great time to have the podcast as well. So happy birthday.
Thank you.
And just what I'm keen to talk about, firstly, Ruth, is your career. As you say there, 30 years in the sector, housing lifer as such, and you've also led, during those 30 years, several large and complex housing associations. So I'm keen to understand what initially drew you into the sector, but also 30 years, what's kept you in the sector as well?
Okay, so what drew me in? I mean, I started working with housing organisations when I was at PwC initially on the audit side, then on the consultancy side, did quite a lot of work advising local authorities and housing action trusts on what they should do with their housing stock and particularly on the creation of new landlords to take those stock. And I think became fascinated really quickly with the difference that a housing organisation could make. So just the power that comes from being able to provide someone with a decent, warm, affordable home just as a platform to achieve so much in life. And that was what attracted me there. I think what's kept me there, I just find it an endlessly complex and endlessly fascinating sector. You know, but particularly I think if you work on the finance side, we're organisations that sort of span the public, the private, the third sector. There is so much involved in running a housing organisation and getting housing services right. And I, as I say, just find that endlessly fascinating.
Definitely. And many will know your journey or know some parts of your journey, Ruth. And as I always say, with candidates going through a process, it's never a linear equation, is it, kind of careers? And so you've spoken in the past about sometimes taking the wrong turn at times of your career. And without going into detail, I guess, how have those experiences shaped your leadership and also your approach to risk?
Yeah, so I think, you know, you're right. A career is never a linear process. So actually some of the most interesting roles I've ever had or the most interesting projects I've ever been involved in have been ones that, you know, perhaps looked a bit different, looked a bit like a sideways move, but they have presented new challenges, new things to learn about, new things to get interested in. Inevitably, I think if that's the case, sometimes you take a turn and think, oh gosh, maybe I've ended up in a role that doesn't suit me or a role that I don't suit. I think that's life. I think that's probably happened to all of us. For me, it's always been about, well, you take the learning from that. You take the benefits it brings you, because actually there's learning from every role, however long or short it is, and you move on to the next. And the great thing I think about the housing sector is there is always something more to learn. There is always something new to develop.
Yeah, I think it's a really fair point. And I guess thinking about your leadership and your approach to leadership, Ruth, we've all seen in the sector, there's been a number of retirements in the sector, but also then quite a volume of first-time chief executives. We were just talking before we set record about your great COO, Maxine, who's just got her first chief executive role. So I guess when you look at those first-time chief executives, what do you see as the attributes you believe that they need to develop or need to have as we look forward into the sector moving forward?
Yeah, and there are all sorts of dimensions to this, I think, without wanting to put people into boxes, because actually one of the great things about the sector is there are a variety of paths to leadership and there are a whole range of leaders and probably the most important sort of characteristic for a new leader is to be yourself. Don't try and fit into someone else's box of what leadership looks like. Um, what do I think incoming leaders perhaps need to have at the moment? There is lots of talk, isn't there, about it's quite a tough time to work in housing, and I think that's the case. So resilience is really important. Um, Ultimately, though, I think if you care about the sector and you care about what you do, and why wouldn't you care about it, to give someone a home is a fabulous thing. Having that as a sort of North Star, if you like, has got to be the most important thing, and leaders will find their own way to express what that means to them.
Definitely. And I guess just on the point of aspiring or first time chief executives, I guess someone mentioned to me this morning around having their own personal board where they have that kind of sounding board for mentors, etc. I mean, how important is that for you, and how important has that been for your career? Just having those mentors or that close connection that you can always bounce ideas off.
Oh, I think it's absolutely critical because, there is a lot of talk, isn't there, that sometimes a CEO's job is lonely. I'm not sure I buy that theory. There are a whole range of people around you to support, but actually there will be times when you want to have a really open and honest conversation with someone you trust, with someone who's got your back, and actually with someone who will give you some unvarnished truths. It's sometimes hard to get some unvarnished truths if you're a CEO, and having a network of people that you can go to, have those open, honest, frank conversations, get a bit of no nonsense advice when you need it is hugely helpful. And actually, yeah, of course, I've got a network of people I can speak to about those kind of things. You always feel energized when you've had those calls, those conversations.
Definitely. No, I agree. I always call it free therapy, to be honest, Ruth. So, as I was saying, the round
Exactly that.
tables, it's free therapy, if anything. So, and when you look at your organisation, Green Square Accord, as you mentioned there, for your fourth birthday, so you merged with the Accord back in April 2021. And you've mentioned previously to myself and publicly that it was something of a cautionary tale. So, I guess 4 years on, with time to reflect, what do you see now as some of the key lessons from that experience?
Yeah, so I think it's pretty well known, isn't it? We had some challenges we had to deal with really soon after merger, particularly around building safety, and the data that underpinned building safety activity, particularly in the Midlands. Um, I mean, you would imagine we've done a huge amount of reflection on that, around what we could have done differently. Was there something we should have picked up sooner to have been able to address it sooner? And there is no doubt we would absolutely, in a future situation, approach due diligence very, very differently. And I think for me, it's really been about understanding the need to drill down into data, into operations, particularly around something as critical as building safety, to understand what is actually going on the ground, and the level of activity that's taking place there, rather than perhaps do what many organisations used to do in due diligence, which is essentially to rely on assurances that they were given. And I think probably if you listen to a whole host of debates in the sector at the moment, there's been that real shift away from just taking assurance to, I think I've heard James Tickell describe it as a sort of sense of creeping unease about anything building safety related, that sense that you have to be continually interrogating what you're being told, what is going on.
Yeah, of course. And I guess that across the sectors, as you say there, what James has said is that there are a number of building safety challenges that many organisations are still grappling with. So when you reflect back on that merger, what do you believe are some of the red flags or indicators leaders should be looking for, particularly if they're in those merger partnership discussions?
Yeah, and it's really interesting because I don't think the red flags are particularly different in a merger situation to in a business as usual situation, particularly when it comes to building safety. So actually for me, it's about, do I understand what reported performance is telling me? Does it make objective sense given the other sources of information I have, whether that be complaints, whether that be customer tenant feedback, whether it be a sense of what's happening operationally? If performance is being reported on by one part of the organization, can I replicate that performance reporting? Can I recreate what is being told to me? Do I understand where the data's come from that supports that performance reporting? And if I wanted to, could I drill down from a very top level statistic to an individual property level and understand how individual property data feeds into my overall reported performance figures? And just a really basic check in terms of, do I understand how many assets I am responsible for? Do I understand what the number is of those assets for which I'm responsible for? And if that number changes month on month, do I understand why it's moved? And all of those, I think, absolutely applicable if you're in a BAU situation with no merger on the horizon versus if you're in a merger situation and you're carrying out due diligence.
Yeah, and I guess, Ruth, on that as well, you know more so than anyone that there are clearly a number of partnership or merger discussions in the sector given the economic climate. So I guess if Green Square Accord were to consider another partnership or merger in the future, what would you approach differently from the outset?
Yeah, you can imagine it's something I've given a lot of thought to. And really one of the interesting things about our merger was the extent to which it was probably a first sort of teams based merger. So our build up to merger took place throughout 2020. It seems a really long time ago now, but if you look back, we were in the depths of COVID
Of
then,
course.
weren't we?
Yeah.
Absolutely nothing was happening in person. And so all of our due diligence, all of our merger discussions, all happened via a whole variety of electronic mediums. Now that's great in terms of getting things done. You
Yep.
can be really
Yep.
transactional and get through stuff. But what you miss is just that sense of human connection and getting alongside people and understanding how an organization functions in real time. We may never be placed in that situation again. I mean, let's hope we're not. But I think it really highlighted the importance of just getting a proper understanding of how the organization you're merging with works in practice.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I completely forgot. Like I say, there's so many transactional. I think that's such a key thing, particularly around the hybrid working. You look at very agile organisations, and we've gone through this. Our own pain points of being probably too agile, if you can call that, and that is you get
Yeah.
through transactional, you get through so much work, but you probably miss that kind of cultural alignment to a certain extent, and that probably that looking at the whites of people's eyes as well, which is a huge tell.
Completely. And just sort of taking the temperature of an organisation. So we've fairly recently moved into our new offices and brought teams together from a really disparate set of officers. And actually the thing we underestimated was the benefit of connection that just came from having people in one place, those informal conversations, the conversations that come from, just wandering across an office and saying, oh, I see you're in today. Can I just have 5 minutes with you talking about this? And, if you were working in a more hybrid way, you wouldn't dream of putting in a Teams call to someone about something like that. But it's so powerful.
Of course, you'd automatically assume that something was wrong if there, rather than
Yes,
just a catch-up call,
exactly.
does it? So it's no, I completely agree. And you mentioned culture there, Reef. You've been really open with me as well around that the cultural challenges that you had post-merger. So I guess along with the office relocation, what have you done to rebuild a cohesive, values-led culture? But I guess secondary to that question is, how do you then check in to know that it's working and still working?
Yeah, so we've done a huge amount. I suspect we probably would have done anyway, even had we not had our
Of course.
building safety issues, to look at how do we create a culture for a single organisation. And we did lots of work around, okay, let's think about the kind of culture we want to build and how do we describe that culture. And one of the things I'm absolutely focused on is we don't describe culture in all sorts of wonderful abstract words, because actually you can put those on a piece of paper and no one really knows what you mean. We want culture to be real. So let's be as real and descriptive as possible when we talk about our culture. And, let's name the kind of behaviours we want to see. And probably just as importantly, let's name the kind of behaviours we don't want to see. What would we say is absolutely not typical of our culture? So you give colleagues as much as possible in terms of this is a culture we want. We involved colleagues across the business in terms of describing, defining the culture. How do we capture it? What is it that's important to us? We came up with the GSA way. We came up with a whole set of behaviours that underpin the GSA way. And we have just continued to talk about it ever since. We've also linked all sorts of things to that desired culture. So we have a colleague awards, GSA Way awards. We have a Way to Go hero every month for a colleague who embodies the values that we've set out in our organisational culture. And we want to make it a living, breathing thing.
Yeah, definitely. And I guess just with that, new starters, they've got to feel it, haven't they, when they join the organisation. From your perspective, when you sat down with a one-to-one with a new starter, what have they said about the culture at GreenSquareAccord?
Yeah, so it's really interesting. It's a question we ask people, and we ask them at intervals on their journey with us. So we ask, people who've just gone through recruitment and selection, what did it feel like? Then we ask people as they join and at intervals after. And we also ask people as they leave the organisation, because you get a particular perspective then. And what people have talked to us about, and what I've been really heartened by is a few things that they highlight. So the first thing they highlight is the extent to which it's a collaborative culture. So people genuinely come together from across the business to do the right thing for a customer, which is fabulous for me to hear, because we all talk at length, don't we, about organisational silos, but hearing that people will come together when it's necessary, that's a big win for me. And along with that comes a sense of you're joining an organisation where there is a whole bunch of colleagues who want you to succeed and will do whatever they can to support you to succeed. That feels really powerful. And an organisation that is built of people who want to do the right thing for our customers. And, having that as a North Star, that idea of we're here to serve customers. Everyone says customers are at the heart of what they do, but, just making that real, understanding that our whole purpose in life is to be a great landlord, whatever that means, I think is a pretty great North Star for people to take on board as an organisation.
Without a shadow of a doubt. And I guess just when you reflect 4 years ago and all probably the issues they had with the merger, and how does, when you hear things like that, how does that make you feel?
It's great, isn't it? Because that is all you can ask. If people come and join an organisation and that organisation feels supportive, collaborative, focused on the customer, we can move mountains if we've got that culture.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And you talk about the GSA way, and once doing my research, Ruth, I saw around your corporate strategy. So you really clear, which I also really like, is that you make it very, very clear and succinct to this simpler, stronger, better, which is a clear vision of what you want to be. I guess what I was keen to understand is simpler, stronger, better. How does that translate into day-to-day decision-making for colleagues and also customers across the organisation and the operating areas?
Sure. And it goes back again to that point I was making earlier, which is there's no point writing a strategy and writing it in wonderful Sunday best language if nobody can understand it, and critically, if nobody can tell whether you've delivered it or not. So our absolute challenge with the strategy was, we looked at our organisation, we looked at the organisation that had been created post-merger, and actually we knew that we weren't delivering for our customers. And if we are not delivering for our customers, that's about as fundamental as it gets. So the strategy was about saying, okay, we think there is a series of actions we need to take so that we can deliver better for customers. How do we capture that in a way that everyone in the organisation can understand? How do we capture it in a way that's really clear so when we share it with customers, they absolutely know what we're going to do and what they can hold us to account for? And how do we make sure it's really measurable? And simpler, stronger, better was a way of capturing that. So it was about saying, actually, one of the things we knew we had to do was to simplify the structure of our business, simplify some of the activity we were involved in. We didn't have the bandwidth to do everything we were doing and do it well. So Simplification, really important. We knew that following on from that, that would strengthen our business, and actually having a resilient, financially sound business is so important, isn't it? You can't do anything without that as a basis. And that would then let us invest in the things that really mattered to customers. And once we were able to express it like that, once we were able to be really, really clear about, well, we're going to do this and this is the outcome we expect, and this will be better for customers because actually the strategy became the easiest thing in the world to write and the easiest thing in the world to share with colleagues. So our sort of measure of success is if everyone in the organization knows what the strategy is and knows how their role contributes to it, then yeah, we will go a long way.
Yeah, of course. And I guess just in regards to that customer voice, that customer centric culture, which you're really promoting, I ask this on pretty much every podcast, Ruth. So around because you hear it banded around the sector so much, is right. It's making sure that the customer voice is properly heard, embedded into strategy, and also actioned upon. I guess from your perspective, but how do you make sure the customer voice is properly heard at GSA, particularly from those customer communities or groups that are less engaged, to less inclined, should I say, to engage? So there's what people call the silent minorities, I guess.
I think for us, it's about making sure it's as easy as possible for customers to engage with us. Because actually, if someone doesn't want to engage with us, that's probably on us. We've probably not found an appropriate way for that customer to engage with us. So we do a range of things. You know, we offer a whole variety of ways for people to engage with us. You know, we speak to our customers every day. We take hundreds of calls every day. We get hundreds of emails every day. We get hundreds of contacts via our app every day. Every single one of those contacts is our customers telling us something about our organisation. So, you know, we're never short of ways to hear the voice of our customer. Sometimes it's just about listening and understanding how we respond. So we have all of that rich information. We've then got a big range of formal ways of engaging with us. So if people want to be heavily involved, they can get involved in our customer panel. We're looking at regional forums for people to get involved, right down to very local arrangements in terms of, you know, who are our champions out on patch in particular estates, telling us whether our estates management service is working well. Those formal structures. Then there are informal structures. You know, people contact us on social media. That gives us a perspective on the organisation. We go out. We run customer roadshows every summer. Weather is always variable. But, you know, they're a really direct way of actually going out onto our estates, going out to our customers and engaging with them. And you get enormous amounts of feedback there. So it's really about capturing all those opportunities and understanding how we're going to respond to them.
Yeah, it's a really fair point. And I guess just the final point around strategy, Ruth, is that your strategy also places emphasis on those three key pillars, which are building trust, investing in what matters, and getting the basics right, which I thought was really interesting as well. I guess when you look at those three holistically, what has proved the most challenging to embed in practice? And then how are you making sure that you've got sustained progress across all three?
Yeah, so I'll answer the second bit for that first. How do you make sure you've got sustained progress all three? That's about just checking constantly. So, you know, we know because customers tell us each and every day what are the things that matter most to them. Is it easy to get hold of us? Is it easy to speak to us once you've got hold of us? Do we do what we say we'll do? Do we address your issue? Quite often that's a repairs issue, stroke an investment issue, but you know there are other things, and so we measure all of those, and that, you know, that I think is a continuing challenge. You know, as housing organisations, we're big operational businesses, aren't we? We have hundreds, thousands of transactions with customers every day, and our job is to continually make sure that as close to 100% of those interactions, those transactions, go as smoothly as possible. And you never get to job done on that. I mean, and usually the point at which you think it's job done is when something comes completely out the blue, and throws you off course. But you really focus on that, and I do think, you know, rebuilding trust, rebuilding faith in services is a really hard thing to do. I think the only way you can do it is by consistently delivering. So there are all sorts of stats, aren't there, that if someone has a bad experience with an organisation, it probably takes about 6 good experiences before they're ready to let go of the bad experience. We have to acknowledge that, and we have to accept it's on us to make sure that every interaction is as smooth as it can be, because that's how you build trust.
Yeah, I completely agree. And looking forward, Ruth, now, I guess it sounds like a really exciting time for Green Square Accord with the corporate strategy, and obviously moving forward from your 4th birthday. So what are the big opportunities on the horizon for Green Square Accord, and where do you want to take the organisation next?
Yeah, so the big thing for us this year is around that investment. So we've had to do a whole lot of work on simplifying the business, on data, on particularly things like planning, stock investment. It now really feels that we're at the stage where we can reap the benefits of that. So we've talked a lot this year about our budget for the coming year sees an increase of 50% in terms of investment in existing homes. That's massive for us. We want customers to see the benefit of that as quickly as possible. So it's investing in homes, it's investing in the things that customers have told us are the most important. So actually the things that contribute to a warm, secure home, heating investment in windows and doors, investment in essential things like fire safety, but also the things that make people enjoy where they live. So actually a focus on things like communal areas, on improving neighbourhoods, so that people can see the benefit of what we're doing. That's really important. And then there's a big piece for us about investing in the service offering. So actually how can systems make it as easy as possible to deal with us? So we're in that post-merger world where we've got lots of separate systems still. Big piece for us is moving on to a single housing management system, so we can really offer that consistent service. And it sounds really boring and techy, doesn't it? But it'll be a huge step forward, and it will underpin everything we want to do. So yeah, our focus for this year is investment.
Even as a small business, Ruth, we're just about to go live on a new CRM in May. Don't think I've ever been so geekily excited in moving across. So I definitely understand of it on a smaller scale.
So
100%.
massive. When we get it right, it will be huge.
Oh, definitely. And I guess from a sector perspective, the sector is challenging, but it continues to evolve. So what do you see as some of the biggest risks, but also on a positive note, what are the biggest opportunities for the sector in the next 3 to 5 years?
Yeah, and the sector does evolve, doesn't it? And probably, going back to where we started, one of the things that is most exciting about this sector is the way that pretty much whatever has been thrown at us, we keep delivering. The sector now looks massively different to what it did 30 years ago. And I'm sure in 30 years' time, it'll look unrecognisable again. But it's still a sector that continues to deliver. What do I think of the challenges? I think economically it's really tough. So if you look particularly at the financial dynamics of the sector, we are a sector where our income is very largely fixed and is constrained through rent regulation. That's as it should be. We provide low cost housing, so you have to have regulation around income. But what you find in our sector is as income is fixed and increases only very gradually, the demands on that income increase almost exponentially. So actually rents now are being expected to pay for a whole bundle of things that were never envisaged in the original rent settlement. So, our customers' rents pays for all sorts of things. It pays for housing management and maintenance. Well, yeah, that's as expected. It also goes to subsidise new build housing. That is a more expensive process than ever it was, and it also goes to pay for a massive uptick in terms of investment in existing stock, things like decarbonisation, things like bringing properties up to modern energy efficiency standards. None of those costs were envisaged at the time our rents were originally set. So you have a real challenge in terms of the financial model for the sector, and you are seeing that play out. Some of the publications, the quarterly account surveys, show the pressure that's putting the sector under. And you've talked about the fact that's driving a wave of consolidation in the sector. I can't see that won't continue. So I think that's a challenge. I think meeting expectations will continue to be a challenge because of that. The standards that we expect from social housing are rightly increasing. That is always a challenge to manage. So yeah, plenty for us to get to grips with.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess that I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation, Ruth, as always, as I always do anyway. But it was, I guess, before I let you go, there are some quick fire questions that I need to run through. So I guess the first question is, what has been the most valuable leadership lesson you've learned?
I think it's something you learn, you have to learn once you become a CEO and have any kind of public profile in the sector, that all sorts of people will have a view on you, and it might be hugely positive or it might be hugely negative, and none of those views will have anything to do with you. They will be views that people have of you that you may feel bear no resemblance to you, but they're people's views, and you've kind of got to live with it.
Yeah, and thick skin as well. And I guess...
hide like a rhino, I think, is a necessary prerequisite.
Oh, brilliant. And what advice would you give to an aspiring housing leader?
Go for it. Take on all the opportunities, all the challenges, all the new and exciting projects you can, because the more experience you can get, the better.
I love that. And what do you believe to be the key leadership qualities needed today?
You've got to care about what you do. You've got to passionately believe that providing someone with a warm, safe, affordable home is one of the most important things you can do for people. Because if you passionately believe that, everything you do to achieve that will be worth it.
I couldn't agree more. And final question, one leadership book you'd recommend to our listeners?
Oh, gosh. So I don't do anywhere near as much reading as I should do. But the book I've read most recently that resonated with me is John Seale's Human Experience book. Just because it is such a wonderfully accessible way of getting to the heart of what matters to customers. And his mantra of, if in doubt, be human, I think is just so simple, but yet so powerful. It's the book I wish I'd written.
I'm scribbling it down. We've got this recorded, but I'm still scribbling it down to go onto Amazon after this call.
Fabulous book. I would recommend.
Brilliant. Thank you, Ruth. And thank you for joining us on the Housing Collective podcast. It's lovely to see you, and I'll look forward to catching up with you soon as well.
Brilliant. Thanks, Tom.
Thank you.